move into questions from staff. You've already acknowledged the attainment gap and our poor results there, and just shocking across the board. Not your words, not making the progress that we've made in the data. But this isn't a University of West of England Bristol problem. It's not even a Bristol problem. It's a nationwide problem. Yeah. I equate it. We've got this stop and search statistics all the time. We're just getting some health inequalities, particularly about global majority females as well. But this one, and our leafy bastions, and you mentioned it earlier around institutional racism as well. What's the reaction of your colleagues up and down the country in tackling this? Because it's been there, and it seems to be, with a few results, relatively impenetrable.
Yeah, I think the Universities UK have done a number of pieces of work. There are guidelines, not just on this particular topic, but on many topics. The problem with guidelines is they're guidelines. Right. And the challenge for us as a sector, given that all universities are autonomous, is making sure that best practice is identified, disseminated and spread, and that actually there is learning across institutions, so we're all making the same mistakes again, or we're wasting time by inventing things that have been tried and don't work. So there are very clear guidelines, there are very clear case studies. Often what happens is they are adopted, but for whatever reason they don't get the same impact in other universities. So the question for us is, why doesn't it work here? What's different about us? Because broadly universities all do the same thing. So why is it different here? And that's culture, that's behaviour, that generally isn't structural, because most universities structurally look pretty similar. It's about will, and it's about culture and behaviour. And that's a more local thing to tackle. The other issue is often a mindset which is, we can only do so much because what we're seeing has already created disadvantage in schools, and therefore what's coming through is some of that complexity. Now my argument for that one is I don't buy into that. When we take a student onto our programs, we are saying to that student, we believe you have the ability to succeed, thrive and flourish. We believe that you can come out with a good degree, and that's a combination of your hard work and our work. When we look at our results, one of the worrying things is we can have good students coming through from schools, but then the outcomes, if you are a black student as opposed to a white student, are different. So it can't be that the talent that's coming in some way is not able to succeed. So that's what we do. We have to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that those students feel supported, encouraged, that we're giving them content, that we're assessing them in the appropriate way, that does recognise their backgrounds, their heritage, so that it makes sense. And that's a big challenge, and we've been on that journey for a while. And we started with the curriculum, decolonising the curriculum, but that's only part of the story. And you know and I know that that's really only had an impact in some parts of the university. It's not all parts of the university, so a bit more work.
Yeah, interesting that drop off and gap, because that was the same gap that I faced, leaving primary school, going to secondary school, and in my generation, educational subnormal from the 1973 co-ed report of we're first born, second as in first generation to be brought up here. And we were seen as different, not taught correctly, and it's interestingly seen those same outcome gaps now.
Yeah, and we do have, obviously there are attainment gaps in other populations. It's just our worst is between black and white. If we look at white boys from lower socioeconomic groups, that's pretty appalling as well in comparison to girls. But we need to keep focused on our biggest gaps.
I was pleased earlier on, you mentioned community 3 or 4 times right at the beginning, but over the last 3 years we've had the austerity cuts, as I don't really need to remind you, COVID, focus here obviously needs to be on income and particularly international students. But for the work that I do and our communities that will be watching this and who we, how important are they to you still in terms of community engagement and the work University of West England Bristol does?
Critical. I've been here almost 30 years now. And throughout my time I was in the health and social care faculty to begin with and then progressed across the rest of the university. We've always been a university of the city, for the city and with the city. It's like a stick of rock, break the stick of rock, and UE is the city, and that obviously is shorthand for the region because we sit in a regional perspective. How we engage with our local communities is critical to our future, and that's about where can we add value, but it's also where can we spot talent. It's also about where can we join things up differently, because many of our students will be working in those communities, partly because we're a regional university, so our student intake is quite local, and interestingly, Bristol and the wider city region is fairly sticky for graduates, so lots of our graduates will stay, even if they didn't start here, they stay here. So we have to instill in them this sense of community, this sense of service back to and engagement with. The other piece, I guess, as part of this is that it's part of the health background, I guess, which drives a lot of my thinking and decision making, is we have a role to play in multiple ways of making this place better than it has been and better than it is, and we have to do that in partnership with. What I've seen over many, many years is our initiatives that seem to forget your starting place is the community first, and understanding what works for that community. And we've got great examples over the years of big shiny buildings or initiatives that get kicked off and then communities don't engage. Well, we shouldn't be surprised because the communities weren't involved in the first place. So start with the need and the community and work with. Don't ever forget that. And I would argue that that's the same when our graduates go into schools. Work with. And in health, there was a huge initiative which was a mental health initiative really, but I think it applies to many, many other things. And that was, don't do things to us, do things with us. And that brings, I think, brings ownership, but also brings a better understanding, because we started with lived experiences. I need to understand the lived experience and what's really driving your needs before I can go anywhere near helping and supporting you. And we just need to remember that.
As we're celebrating Black History Month and Black Excellence at UE, we lost one of our great black figures in the person of Professor Paul Olumide. What impact has that had on UE, and how is UE going to ensure representation and diversity in the VCE and senior leadership?
Great question. And Paul was my appointment, and I grew up with Paul, in effect, together, and Paul had a huge impact on me. I'll share this with you, it's not something that I haven't told him. So when Paul walked into the room for the interview, within 5 minutes I knew he was the man. And he was the man for me because of his intelligence, his emotional intelligence, and how he could own an agenda. Now, none of us are perfect, but Paul worked in different places of the university, and I'll say this, I trusted him implicitly. So much so that I had no hesitation in putting Paul into, in effect, completely different areas. Paul's background was engineering and construction, and he started off in a construction faculty. I then asked him to go into the business school. I asked him to go into art and design. Not his areas at all, but he was superb. I then asked him to come into the executive and say, can you help us? And I'm still a great friend of Paul's. I still We still have him with us, so he's our Pro-Chancellor, and he is on the Walscourt Foundation, which is a charity that works to support the university, and we meet regularly. And I have no hesitation in pulling him in when, and he will come, when we need additional support. Fantastic man, brilliant. And he then has worked with me. And of course, Paul is now retired, so where's our next generation coming from? There are some great people in the university. My hope is that we build that talent and we move those people.
Speaking of which, about the great talent, and our final staff question is that what can they, how would you encourage them to get involved? What can staff do? What more could you be doing in your role, and could staff across the university be doing to accelerate our progress?
So I think that's about making sure that we are working together on this transformation programme. There's a great opportunity here to make sure that we shape it properly. It's out for consultation. It's a set of proposals, feedback, and in particular feedback from staff whose voices might not have been heard. So don't feel inhibited. I'm working with the WEN group. So this is the group of female potential professors or are professors and are progressing their career. It's great having conversations. So let's have those conversations. Don't be afraid to invite me into things. Don't be afraid to invite others into having open conversations. We don't necessarily need an agenda. What we need is to start the communication. And from that, there may well be things that we can do together, programs, projects that we can invest in and take forward. The starting place is create the space to have the conversation. This place is very, very busy. And sometimes that first move is difficult. Black History Month is a great example. We've started it. You did a fantastic job of beginning to share that narrative, beginning to open eyes. Let's build on that. And my hope is that Black History Month isn't just for the month. Black History Month should be obviously profiling, but then we should be carrying on those conversations throughout the year. It should be our norm. We shouldn't feel inhibited about putting things into boxes that say we'll do that then and then never again until the following year. That's hopeless. We need a continuum. So let's have the conversations. Let's keep the challenge going. Let's find the answers together. Invite me to things. Make sure that I know. And it doesn't have to be lengthy meetings. It could be, half an hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes with a cup of coffee. In the end, it will be us that determine the shape and what this university is going forward. And that is all of us. And that's the important bit for me. Let's make sure we've got the communication and we can work on good ideas together. A good idea, I keep saying it, a good idea can come from everywhere and anywhere. And let's surprise ourselves as we do it.